so that you can share memories and provide a tribute to him. And that way everyone else knows who he is. But before we get to that point, I would like to just introduce a few people, and so that when we exit and have our outside break after the service, if you have questions or want to respond or talk to someone different, then you'll kind of know who they are and where they fit into his life. So if you feel like standing, all the people that met James since we moved here in 2015, would you either stand or raise your hand so that people understand and know who you are? James and I attended a little Baptist church 2 miles from our house until the last year. Thank you so much. And that's where we met a lot of these people. And then we've connected with a group of intercessors, and I'm looking, Pam, where are you? Pam? There. Oh, the other Pam. There's 2 Pams. Good. Okay. There's a group of intercessors that have been gracious and allowed me to come into their circle in Caldwell. So would you guys raise your hand? Mary and Pam and Jeanette and Janet. It's double for you, I know. Okay. Then I want to recognize my brother and his wife and my niece. They came from 75, 80 miles away. Would you stand? That's Charlie and Debbie and Caroline. We know the good and bad on each other. So and then we have people that have known James for around 10 years, which would be Michelle and Jay from Fort Worth. And James they were extremely close. And then in our church in Idaho, James pastored for 2 years in Idaho, and MJ and Kelly flew in from Washington State. So if you want to know what he was like as a pastor, you can ask him. The thing about James, he was a public speaker. He was a motivational speaker. He couldn't read notes and he couldn't prepare a sermon. But he was an incredible counselor, and he pastored the people in that church by visiting them, taking an interest in their personal lives and being there for them. And Pam is our next door neighbor. She met James. Her little granddaughter Lily at the back would come over every day to visit James and called him Grandpa. And then on the front, let me see if I'm going to come back. And on the back row, on this side, we have 2 of the doctors. This is Dr. and sorry, my brain. Help me, Patrick. Patrick and Mary Ann. James actually married them. He performed ceremonies for, do we figure, 5 to 7 doctors over the 20 years that we were in the Marketplace ministry. And they were one of the couples, and they drove from Atlanta to be here to honor him. So if you have questions about any of that, they're the ones you want to ask stories from. Then on the front row, we have my grandson Asher and my granddaughter Layton, who live in the country close to here. And they got to see James more than any of the other grandchildren and honored him that way. Then we have, on this front row, we have Ryan. I don't know where Melissa was checking the temperature, Dr. Rod's wife. I don't know where Dr. Rod is.
He's right there.
He's at the door. Okay. So Rod and Melissa are coming in, and Rod was James's personal upper cervical chiropractor. And that's why we ended up moving here partially, was so Rod could keep James out of the facial pain that he suffered with all those years. And the last several years, Rod did such an excellent job. He didn't have pain unless he fell, and once he couldn't walk, he didn't fall anymore. So it worked out very well. And then in the center by Melissa, we have my wife-in-law, DJ's wife prior to me, and she's from Oklahoma. She and James's daughter and DJ's daughter, Mandy, drove in from Oklahoma to be here. And so some of the pictures, if you had time, and afterwards you will, that the ladies that helped me set up yesterday had positioned, They're mission trips that we were on. They were family pictures. This table up here is more of his pre-life, before he and I married. And so that was some of his businesses in Oklahoma and one of his acting businesses in Spain. And those pictures are in a book that was written later about that life. But the major focus, and for me, the only man I knew was after he met Jesus Christ. And so that's the celebration today. So I want to welcome you. I thank you so much. And Pastor LeVarn, I don't know why he's sitting behind that pulpit back there, but he was very gracious to allow us to utilize his facility today. And I tell you, I've come to love Pastor LeVarn, so I'm going to ask him to stand so people can see him. And we met through the food ministry work that Mary Hillman has, Loaves and Fishes. And he's just an incredible man, and I'm honored that he would be here and allow us to use his facility. So if you want to thank him afterwards, you're welcome to do that too. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to move into open mic, and if we could have anyone that wants to share, it is being video recorded. That's a disclosure. And we would like you to limit it to between 2 and no more than 3 minutes. If you have a memory or a share, and if some people only speak 30 minutes, then the others can extend to 3 minutes. So I have little markers so that when you're talking, we will give you signs on where you stand on that. But because for the recording, they would like you to be in front of this mic, so I'm going to step to the side, and I'll be your little guide on the minutes. And if you would just come and stand on this side, anyone that wants to say something about James, then I think we can have like 5 at a time, and as one goes back to their seats, we could keep rotating. And that way, that will determine the length of the service before we have food in the back. All right? And I want to thank the ladies of Providence have been very gracious to bring food along with the caterer. So a special thank you to all of you. They love James. They have some stories about him exiting the choir, so I would like for them to share for sure. Oh yeah. All right, so come on up.
I knew him when we lived, the Petties, my mom, my dad, my sister lived in the Carolinas. So we, I guess, enjoyed him as he was after Jesus Christ. And then they left before us to come to Texas, and I didn't see him for about a year, and then I came to Texas. He wasn't really my blood grandfather, but I loved him as if he was.
I'm not a good public speaker, so I'm sorry ahead of time. And I cry whenever I go into church, I cry. So there's a good chance that you'll see me crying today. And that kind of leads me into the story that I have about James. I met James in North Idaho. I lived there with my family. And he had come in to share his book with us that he had written, Feed the Tiger. And I don't ever go to things by myself. I need my support system to come with me, usually because I cry. And he came in and talked about his life and his book, and I knew I had to have the book. I had to read that book, and I knew I didn't have enough money to buy that book. Here comes the tears. So I went out to my car, and I dug through my car and found all the coins. And I went and I stood in line, and because I didn't want anybody to know I didn't have enough money to buy that book. Here's my support system. So waited till everybody was done, and I went through and I put all my coins out on that table. And he stood up and said, "You don't need that money," and hugged me and said he'd been waiting for me and he knew why I was there, and he signed the book and told me that Jesus loved me. And he gave me that book, and I took it home and I read it that night and couldn't wait to get back into church the next weekend so that I could come and thank him. He became a father to me. And I was always ashamed that I cried in church. And he told me that I should stop being ashamed, that it's a blessing that I love so deeply. So anytime I feel like I'm going to cry, he's there telling me it's okay to cry, that it's a blessing that I love so deeply. So we came here yesterday and helped set up things, and I knew I was going to cry, so I went outside and I went out there and I talked to him and told him that I was going to cry, and he told me it's okay, it's a blessing. I told him that it's sad that I've lost him, and he told me he said to me, I'm not yours. You didn't lose me, I'm not yours to lose. And so I just the wind came and blew, and I smiled, and I didn't lose him. He's not lost, he's found. And he said, no. And I said, I'm not lost, I'm found. So the tears that we cried today for him are for the love for him, not for the loss of him, because we haven't lost him.
I'll never forget the first day that I met him. My friend Mary Hillman, and we went there to pray with him, to learn about his life, and what a blessing it was. I sat with him many times. He and I sang together, we laughed together, we shared scripture together, and he always said, we're a mess, but Jesus is the best. And I agree 100%, because without him, where would we be? But James was such an example of the love of God. Going through what he was going through, we would raise our hands and point up, because that's where we knew our helper is. When we're in trouble, we turn to him. When we're lonely, we turn to him. And I thank God for the day that he put James and Rhonda in our lives. And Lord, I just pray that I can be an example of James to other people. That the love of God will fill me so much that I can't help but share, because he's everything to us. And James and I used to laugh, because I can't sing very good. But we would laugh at our own singing. As we would be singing, we'd be laughing. And he said, the joy of the Lord is our strength. I said, yes, it is. And I learned in church that when you sing to Jesus. And if someone in front of you doesn't care about it, well, that's okay. Because you're not singing to them, you're singing to him. And James taught me that also. But the most important thing he taught me, love, the love of God. So I will praise God the rest of my life for placing him in my life, and thank God for his love and mercy and grace every day.
I have a very good friend who lives in Somerville that I met in Germany 20 years ago. Wow. And she has moved several times, but now she's back here. So when all this started, are we going to go? What are we going to do? I called my friend and I said, do you have a place to stay? And she said, sure. So she found us this amazing woman's house with this beautiful beach house. And there's been a lot of God moments there. Kelly actually saw an angel one night flying over. And it's just been amazing the way God has connected all of this. And we're all really connected by something.
Yes.
So yesterday Becky was here, didn't know James and Rhonda. And I think that part of this is so Becky and Rhonda can meet. And Becky helped us with all the stuff, helped us put everything up. And then as we left here, we were going towards Rhonda's and we had lunch. And Becky said, how does it feel to know someone that's sitting at the right hand of God? And that's where he is. I think he always was there. God loaned him to us for a while. So I don't have a lot of memories because, well, I fractured my skull and I had an aneurysm rupture in my head, so, oh, I got the twang. Did you hear that? Did you just hear that? Anyway, so I don't have a lot of old memories of him. But James and I were very similar in that we understood our job is whoever comes into our life, we need to feed each other. And if we separate, it doesn't mean that the love's not there, the friendship's not there. It's just, that's, our time is over. So, he was amazing. Rhonda, you're amazing. Your love of God is truly inspiring.
Okay. James Tomasi, a name that will live in our hearts forever. James was a man that could put your nerves at ease in a split second. His jovial nature, his love for life, and affection for all is truly unparalleled. I had the honor of meeting James and Rhonda when I first married Sohel and moved to the United States. Before meeting them, I really felt it was a foreign concept to call parents other than your own mom and dad, which is something that everyone in our family did. But as soon as I met them, the connection was instant. It only took a moment to understand why they were mom and dad. The love they showered, the warmth they spread, the caring and compassion was enormous. It was truly a blessing to be with them. When Sohel moved to the United States, he felt like an orphan. Coming from a large, tight-knit family, he moved here to having nobody by his side, until walked in James. James took him under his wing and offered support, guidance, and unconditional love. James was not a father figure. He took the role of being Sohel's actual father. When Sohel would work 16 to 20-hour shifts, he never had the time to look after the home in which he lived. So James, Rhonda, and Ryan would wholeheartedly take on that responsibility, giving Sohel the luxury of coming to a clean, organized place that he could call home. Another such incident that shows how thoughtful and how selfless both James and Rhonda are. James and Sohel needed to drive 4 hours to pick up groceries for the gas station, and the list was so long that they needed 2 cars. When James pulled up, he brought Rhonda with him, not for the company, but to drive the second car so that Sohel could rest and sleep in between his long shifts. Last one, I promise. Understanding that Sohel was feeling homesick and his need for a place of worship, James took the initiative to go out of his way and find a mosque for Sohel in Norman, Oklahoma. He insisted that he wait in the car for Sohel and encouraged him to take as much time as he needed. I fear that if I tried to list all the precious moments our family has shared with James and Rhonda, we would run short of both words and time. James used to always tell me that Rhonda was the most beautiful woman in the room, no matter where he went. We all stand here in unison today, Mom, to reiterate Dad's words. You truly are the most beautiful person, inside and out. You cared for Dad selflessly, held your head high, and your positivity has always spread wide through the darkest of times. Please know that we are and will always be here for you.
Hello, I'm DJ, and I'm very honored to be Mom's wife-in-law. And we felt that James blessed me in life with 2 daughters, and Mandy's here with me today. What I'll never forget probably is his conversion, his born-again Christian life, which I'm so honored to hear your stories today, and I've learned so much more even in this short amount of time. But I would be remiss if I didn't say and share what he shared with me when he told me that God had brought him to Rhonda. That God had a woman for him for many, many purposes, greater than both of them. And that he prayed that I could find, the love and the support. Scott, I'm sorry if I'm bouncing the sound there. Because he said, this woman is a prophetess, DJ. I know it. God has told me. And we have so much work to do. Our family are so blessed. So further on with his, I agree with when she said that, he is here. His spirit will always be here. And that he had the courage to follow God's will and marry Rhonda and bring her to us. And now our family will keep growing.
My name is Brandon Williams. I met Rhonda and James a couple years ago when I came out to build a goat pen, I think it was. But we did some more work. But what I remember about James is to be in his presence was like to be in the presence of the Lord. And first time Miss Rhonda introduced him to me, or I got to go in and meet him, it was I was having some trouble with my son. And we just, when I met him, you could just feel the presence of the Lord. And he said to me, he said, my brother, he said, what's wrong? He said, something bothering you. And so we began to talk, and I shared with him. And, it's one thing to say, I'll pray for you, but it's another thing to pray with you. So we stopped and we prayed, and he kept praying for my son. I went out for about a week straight or so, and I said, I gotta let my son meet him. And but anyway, once we prayed, it was a sense of calmness that came, and I said, I know everything's gonna be all right, because because we had spoke to God, and every time I go in, and see him, every time I come over, I have to go in and talk to him and see him, and we just talk, and every time it was all about God, it's all about Christ, and like the young lady said, he'd always point and said, Jesus is in control, and sometimes when I go over, it's like meeting him for the first time over and over again. But it was such a blessing to get to know him and Miss Tomasi. And I think the first time we met, my wife was buying some chickens. And so we called her a chicken lady for a while. When we went over, and she told me, every time I go over, she'd give me a box of food, said, take this to such and such. And I thought to myself, this is it's truly the love of God for her caring for someone in our community that she didn't know. And she explained to me, she gave him a ride and gave some other kids a ride, and I kind of figured out who she was talking about. But I just want to say thank you, and thanks for James also. Thanks for introducing me, and it was a pleasure to have met you guys, and you guys are still blessing our community. So thank you, and may he rest in heaven.
What I remember about him is he sat right there where you sat. And whenever my wife and I would sing and they'd walk by, he would his hand up, and we just felt the love. And I was sad that I don't know him, and I didn't know him. And I think about a lot of things. I think about every one of us go to church or go in places and go to our offices or wherever we are, and we see people that we don't know. And it's crazy. We think we know them because we see it every Sunday. But we need to take the time to get to know people. And I think about our country today and how crazy everything is. And yet, if you get to know the person, I don't care who they are. They may not look like you or act like you, or they don't have the same background as you. But we're all God's children. And I hope that with James passing, that each of us get to know people better. Don't just look at them and say hi, and then move on. That's so sad. And what a wonderful story he had for so many people, and I appreciate all the stories that you guys have, but I think all of us should do that. Get to know the people around us, get to know the strangers. When you know them, they touch your heart, and they're just like you, and they have the same hopes and needs. And I appreciate it. I always loved seeing him. I hated it. He got sick and we didn't get to see him because he had such a wonderful smile. I'll never forget that little smile. I closed my eyes now and I could just see. And I just thought he was a weird little man. I raised his hand up when we thought about God, and I just thought, I didn't know that guy. I didn't. And that's unfortunate. And he was a wonderful man from what I hear. And so just go home and meet the people you don't know. Invite them to lunch. Go have coffee with them. Talk to them. Listen to their stories. Because I know that if I would have done that with James, my life would have been even more enriched.
I only know him for 2 or 3 months, but I loved him so much. And he always remembered my name. I don't know how. He would forget everybody's name, but every time I walked into that room, he'd say, Joe. And I think it's because it was my honor that I could carry him from his bed to his chair because I was strong enough to carry him like a child, but it was like holding God close to my heart when I got to carry him to the chair. And he changed my life in 3 months, and he never did get to baptize me like he was going to. But every time I went up there, and I don't know if anybody's already said this, but the only thing I can truly remember is me and you are a little, God is good, but me and you are a little shaky. And I just want to know that I love you, James, and I love you, Miss Rhonda.
One more thing. So, I'm going to the mic cam. I will be there any second. So yesterday I told you my friend Becky was here helping us, and she picked up this Bible, and she said, what was his favorite verse? I said, I don't know, Rhonda would know. But she looked in the front, and this was written down, and I want to read it to you. It's very short. You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. Isaiah 26:3.
Amen.
Just leave it.
Okay. Okay.
While someone else is walking up, and I apologize, I had not looked up James's favorite verse. So if someone else wants to come up, I'll find it. I don't have my reading glasses on, so it makes it hard to read. I'm so sorry, but it does. So I'm going to take the Bible. This is James's Bible, Mandy, so you're taking it at the end.
I was not expecting Rhonda to say that as I was walking in. Oh my goodness. Hello, my name is Mandy Tomasi, and I am James's daughter. As I sit here, I just want to thank each and every one of you for being for being part of his life and his world. Thank you for sharing your stories. As a little girl, when I was born, my mom actually had flatlined for 4.5 minutes. And 56 hours of labor. And so I spent my first day too, with my dad. So it was my dad and me. I was the apple of his eye. I was his little girl. And we always had this connection. had many friends and children, and I felt really, really close with him always. And as I hear your stories, I just feel so blessed to have been part of his world too. When I think of my dad, I think of on Saturdays, we would walk down the coast, and we would have, every Saturday was ice cream day, and I got to pick, I'm going to tell you a funny story. I picked my favorite ice cream and got to pick a favorite toy. And I remember we were in the driveway, and my dad was very particular because he liked his hands, he liked manicured, he liked everything really clean and neat. And I just remember walking with my shoes right in the oil, and he said, Mandy, what are you doing? I was just like, tap, tap, tap. Just kind of looking, and I just remember him just then sharing, even at that age, I was 4 and 5 years old, talking about just so many little lessons I learned. He taught me how to ride a bike. He taught me how to public speak. He gave me confidence when I felt alone. Every single time I spoke with him, it was always, Jesus loves you, and so do I. It didn't matter if I happened to walk into a room. It didn't matter if I had just finished eating. It didn't matter if I had turned the corner. Mandy, don't forget. And I was like, yes, because Jesus loves you. And so do I.
Amen.
So as much as he has poured into so many, I just feel completely honored and blessed that he got to be my daddy. So thank you all for sharing, and I'm listening, and I truly am saving each and every one of your stories, because you're sharing all your stories and moments of my first love. Thank you.
That's as good a demonstration of who James is as anything. I kind of think I should sit back down and end on that. My name's Dr. Patrick Anderson. I speak loud, so I don't have to get too close to the mic. My wife, Marianne, and I drove in from Dallas, Georgia. There is a Dallas, Georgia. It's about a 13-hour drive. And my wife isn't comfortable with public speaking and loves James so much she didn't feel comfortable. So if I go over by a minute or two, I'm stealing Marianne's time. About 20 years ago, I met James, a little bit over 20 years ago. I wasn't a Christian at the time I met him, but I was actively seeking Christ. I didn't know that, but I was definitely seeking out. And for those of you that are Christians, when you witness, some, unfortunately, the worst advertisements for Christianity for me were Christians who were trying to tell me how bad I was for not being a part of their club, which made me and my personality not want to be a part of their club. And James never did that. In fact, he did the opposite. You know what? He made me feel like, man, I want to be more like him. I want to have what he has. I want to know what he knows. And so I still remember that to this day when I witness to people, is that I never felt worse after my interactions with James talking about Jesus. I never felt less than. I felt like, wow, I'm getting closer. I'm knowing him more. That's more what I want. And so I still remember that to this day. As an upper cervical doctor, there's kind of a saying in chiropractic that you never know how far-reaching something you think, say, or do today will affect the lives of countless others tomorrow. And James and Rhonda are that. And I have an example of that because when James passed about 3 weeks ago, as soon as we got the word, I told my wife we have to be there whenever it is. What do we have to do? Move our patients, we have to get there. And we do video testimonials. Our patients give video testimonials that we post on our website. And we have a patient who's been a patient 16, 17 years. And he did a video testimonial within about a week after James passed. And I didn't do the testimonial, so I wasn't asking the questions in any way influencing him. But when I saw the video, he mentions on the video that the reason I've learned about upper cervical and how my wife's and my son and my family's life has changed is because I came and I heard this man speak. And he spoke about the mouth of God. And that was James, because in upper cervical we talk about the top two bones of the neck. Kind of actually has the shape of the mouth of God and where God breathed life into Adam. And James said that during what's called a dinner with the doc 17 years ago in a small office in Dallas, Georgia. And it's changed this entire man's family's trajectory. And they've referred countless others. So that event right there affected people that James would never even meet. The gentleman that got up and spoke that said he didn't really know James, I would tell you to feed the tiger. A group of us, doctors who knew James really well, were driving to a seminar from Georgia to Missouri, and we put Feed the Tiger on the audiobook, which James read on the audiobook. And we all know James. So you'd think we knew a lot of the stories. The book was so compelling, we would stop at a gas station and nobody would get out to pump the gas or go into the bathroom because we were listening to the audiobook. And finally I had to say, you do realize that it'll be here when we get back in. It was going to take us forever to get to Missouri because we couldn't. So for you that haven't read that, if you get it, I can't even do justice to you how amazing his life was. And I imagine the book couldn't have covered probably even half of it. There's probably so many things in there, but it really is, it's something I recommend. Kind of fast forward when somebody had mentioned about how James viewed you and your beauty, it reminded me back in the mission trip when we were on the mission field, we would get together in the evenings and have kind of just wrap-up sessions. And you know, this was a bunch of 20, 25, maybe early 30 students and upper cervical doctors all hanging around a room, and Mama and Papa James and Rhonda. And I remember they would sit next to each other and she'd, rub his neck or his shoulders and he would cuddle up next to her. I remember one of the female doctors leaning into me and she said, "That's so cute. I would love that. Like that's the most amazing thing." And so fast forward, James married my wife and I 13 years ago. And I do fully believe she is the most beautiful woman in every room I've ever in. And I thank you for your mentorship, for showing what love is. The way that you just honored James and loved and just looked at him. And for the women in the room, you cannot know how uplifting that is to a man. If there's one single thing I would recommend if you want your man to be the man you want him to be, is look at him with that look. Lift him up. And for you men, treasure that, honor that if you have that, because it's an unbelievable blessing. And I also want to thank Jesus for putting James and Rhonda in our lives, because it was at a time where, like I said, I was seeking and I was searching, and unfortunately there were some roadblocks, and James was just that perfect oasis, that just, everything you could just need at a time when you're young and thinking that you know everything, and really deep inside being scared that you don't know anything. And every conversation and interaction I have with James, just the two words that come to mind for me would be love and peace. The love of Jesus and God's peace. And that's what I would feel anytime I spent time with James. So thank you.
Okay, so I have known James for 16 years. I married Rod, and I was trying to think of a time where I very first met him. What was my encounter with James? What was the first encounter? And it was, I met Rod first. I lived in Denver, Colorado. So this would have been in 2004, I think. And I met only Rhonda first, and I met Rod. This was the first time I met my now husband. And James was not with Rhonda when I first met her. He had already moved, I guess. Okay, he had already moved. So then, I guess Rhonda and James were coming back through Denver, and I was there, and it was my turn to meet James. And I think I knew that I was going to marry Rod. So now it was time for me to meet his dad. And so we met at Chili's restaurant in Denver. And Rhonda had gone to the bathroom, and I walked in the door. And I looked around this restaurant, and I could not find Rhonda. But I saw James, and he saw me. Never saw his picture, never talked with him, never met him. But my spirit and his spirit knew who we were. It was a second. It was literally just that brief moment in time where you kind of feel a pause. And you're like, hey, I know you. But really, I didn't know him. So that was the beginning. And I got to spend the night before he passed away, right? I saw him on Friday night for 1 hour. Was it a week later he passed away on Saturday? Okay, we were in their home. Asher, the first tall young man that spoke with glasses, that's my son. And several of James and Rhonda's other friends were in the room with him. And up until this point when he got sick, he really didn't talk. He's always been a talker. He's always been joyful. He's always been passionate about life and enthusiastic. And I knew there was a shift because he got very quiet. And I began to worry. But the last time I saw him, he spoke for an hour straight. He would not stop talking. And I thought, where are we going on this adventure? It was beautiful to spend the last minutes with him before he went to heaven. And there's a Bible verse that I came across the other day that I thought of, and I said, I'm going to save this because it made me think of him. And it's Psalms 16:11. You will show me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. That's Psalm 16:11. James was very joyful. Yes, peace. Yes, love. But the man, if you didn't know him, he loved to laugh. And he laughed about the smallest thing. It didn't matter if it was a pebble on the ground, if it was a cloud that was in the shape of a dinosaur. I mean, he was very childlike. If you didn't know him well, I can say that he really exemplified childlike faith, because from person to person, he was like a child, and it was endearing. There was nothing that was bad or wrong or that felt in a negative way, because, you know, like Dr. Anderson was saying, a lot of Christians misrepresent God. But when I looked at him, I said, I want to be like that. I want what he has. And he did a good job of really representing Christ in a very simplistic, non-religious way. His hands were extended to you, to me, to no matter who it was. It's just openness. And so I walk away and I can see, like I think about this day and the last few weeks, and I can picture James in heaven, just embracing people there still. So, thank you.
I just hear all your stories. I'm a little jealous because I was so close to him, but now I see there's so many of you too there are, so I'm kind of excited and jealous. I'm not the only one, you know. I'm like, wow. The thing that he demonstrated to me was just the love of the Father, and I didn't think about this till now. I think James is a forerunner. There's something that's coming.
Yes.
It's the love of the Father without the religious spirit.
Yes.
It's coming. It's coming. And what he had is available to us. What he demonstrated. And that's why I think I loved him so much. I didn't feel the religious spirit, the judgment of others. That's what he demonstrated. That's what he had. And that's what he gave. I'm just so blessed. I've been in the last 10 years. And the whole time he was in a battle. And even in his fight, I see no fault in the man. He was constantly getting hammered, and he still demonstrated the love of God.
Amen.
I'm just grateful that I can call him my friend. I forgot your name? Melissa. What Melissa said, and you know, when we first met him, our spirit man connected. We just connected, and when that fellow said that James sit there, that's where I told my wife I wanted to sit. I've never been here before. She goes, "Listen, back." It doesn't surprise me. No. That's all really I have. What he had is available. That's why we love him so much.
Yes.
We want some of that. And I want to tell each and every one of you, it's available. So, I have one photograph. That's the last thing I got. It's you guys. They'd stayed at our home for a couple of months and they let go. And when they were leaving, I took a picture. And James was doing really good. And you were just looking at him, and I could just see the love. She was like, I'm looking at them with love. And you were looking at James. Just the love that you have for him. The honor that you have for him. Just bless me. I love you guys.
Please forgive me, I'm not a public speaker, but James is a wonderful example of Christian love.
Amen.
I met Rhonda at the First Baptist Church signage while I was digging in the rose bushes, and we had a discussion about persimmons and blah, 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 and I asked her to attend Providence Baptist Church, and she and James started attending. Later, I had the opportunity to sit with James while Rhonda delivered goats or whatever she needed to do, or take her father to the doctor. He always had a sparkle in his eyes. He was always laughing, even when he felt badly. He still exuded Christ's love. We talked about a lack of attendance in churches and what we could do about it and everything. And he said that, and it just stuck with me, that we must have relationships, develop relationships with people before we can witness to them. And all through this, I've heard that James did a wonderful job. Rhonda probably brings a lot of people to James. Maybe that's her calling in life, is to do that. And I was blessed, and I'm saddened that after Rhonda moved to town, and James moved to town, I didn't visit like I should have. And I regret that. Thank you.
James Tomasi, my grandfather, he wasn't my blood, but I considered him my blood. He wouldn't care what you wear, tattoo. He wouldn't care what you wear, as long as you were wearing your birthday suit. Even the toughest people that some people I know that know me that may not remember them here. I know that he loved everyone, even if he didn't know you that well. He was a good man. I would sit with him when he and my grandma would live back in the country. And it was pretty nice. I'd watch football with him a lot. And the day before he died, I saw him on his deathbed. And that night, I asked God, why did you take my grandfather away from me? And then I had a vision, and my grandpa was in that vision. And he told me that he had finally stopped suffering. And he's a very good man.
I'm Ryan. James is my stepfather. He came into my life when I was just 3 and raised me as his own son, which speaks volumes in itself. I wanted to share some of his story because I'm realizing maybe not a lot of people have known James and his backstory. About 20 some years ago, he came down with something called trigeminal neuralgia. This is a disorder where a nerve in the face just goes haywire. They call it the suicide disease because it's the most painful disorder known to man. The way he described the pain was someone drilling a hole in his eyeball at the same time as taking an ice pick to his jaw, at the same time as taking a taser to his tongue. So he was literally bedridden for about 2 years. He was face down in a pillow in the room. I would see him maybe for 5 minutes on Christmas morning, because that's all the energy he could muster just to come downstairs and see the family. So God worked in his life in miraculous ways. The day before he planned on committing suicide, he always told us that God was going to heal him. God was going to heal him. And he felt that word, and he got so many other words along those lines that, he truly had that faith. And the day before he was going to commit suicide, my mother Rhonda, she heard a radio spot, on a Christian radio station, and a doctor was talking about how she gets great results with this disorder. So, they thought, what's it going to hurt? They took him in. He started getting care, and within, I think, 2nd or 3rd treatments, completely pain-free. So this is what kind of projected his life. He was the vice president of a telephone company at the time and completely laid that down. He wanted to help and find as many people as possible that had the same disorder as he did, that there's hope. So that's what started all the mission trips